Mint fire. Hey there, AP world people. Let's keep learning about the gunpowder empires. But today the topic isn't really gunpowder empires. It's sort of like other stuff. So it doesn't really fit any bigger theme. Sorry. All right, let me click ahead. Here we go. Standing armies. I referenced this in the first video. So all the gunpowder armies had standing armies. And standing armies are definitely kind of a really important thing if you want to have a strong, politically controlled country. A standing army is a permanent, full time soldier army, even during times of peace. Traditionally, countries usually had like virtually no soldiers when they were at peace. And they'd be like, oh, this other country declared war on us. Okay, call the peasants, train the knights, get everyone ready for war. It'll take us like 3 months. And during that 3 month period, they're just kind of like rallying the troops, organizing them, getting ready to fight. And that's just kind of the way things, especially were in Europe and also in India to a degree for almost all their history. But standing armies is this new concept, and it definitely starts in the gunpowder empires, but soon every country in the world will do it to a degree, where they just have a full time military that's sort of like standing at attention, ready to fight at a moment's notice. But then they also use these standing armies as kind of like a serious enforcers to oppress any dissent in their population. So if there's some like ethnic minority in your empire that's like saying like, we're not going to pay our taxes anymore, we're going to be our own independent country, you sent in the standing army and you crushed them. Okay, you just crushed them. Um, the Kievan Rus, that's sort of early Russia, and the shogunate of Japan, they were really big at having these standing armies that sort of always kept the peace. And another thing with the Japanese and the Kievan Rus is they're right there on kind of the borders of Mongol lands because there's still some leftover khanates hanging around at this time. And so, yeah, the Japanese and the Russians were just constantly afraid of invasion. And especially with the point with Japan, the samurai were really considered like top tier members of society. They were paid great money. They were trained their entire lives to be just super duper good at sword combat and bow and arrow combat. And they followed their daimyo, that's the Japanese word for lord, to a incredibly devoted way. So it sort of created this hyper warrior culture in Japan that's really going to show through so much of their culture. I want to say until the modern day, but especially until World War II. Japan doesn't really have too much of a warrior culture anymore today, but it still was this, because of the standing army nature of the Japanese people, it created this warrior spirit that you could argue it still flows in their culture to this day. All right, moving on. So let's talk about more tax systems. So tax was a big topic I talked about at the end of the first video in this series. But the Mexica, also known as the Aztecs, history knows them as the Aztecs. We should technically call them the Mexica. The Mexica had a very unique desire for collecting taxes. They would go around to these smaller city states and tribes that lived in Mexico and, yeah, sometimes be like, give us the corn you harvested or give us the metals you've mined. But they would also say, give us some human beings. Okay, so they measured the taxes they collected from people, sometimes in human bodies. And these people weren't really enslaved, though there was slavery in Aztec lands. Um, but the bigger purpose was not to get slaves to work for you. The Aztecs, and I think I've already said this in some other presentations too, but this is going to keep coming up. Their huge thing was they had this religion to their sun god, and they believed that every single day you had to give a heart to the sun god. And so what they would do is they would force these smaller tribes every year to give them either a whole bunch of food or some metal or human bodies, and all that's collectively known as tribute. I think I hit that up in another video, but gotta hit it up again because there's definitely questions about it on the test. So, and it was really because of their military power. I mean, the Aztecs had a very tough military, and no other culture in, well, maybe the Incas, but they never really encountered the Incas. So I'm going to say no other culture in ancient Mexico came close to the Aztecs. They were definitely the big bully on the block, and they just demanded tribute from everybody around them. Um, And the Ming Dynasty of China, they actually had kind of a similar vibe in their part of the world. So they're sort of comparable to the Aztecs. Because yeah, the Ming, they were the first country to enforce a hard currency system. If you read the reading already, you heard about flying money. That was the paper money, and of course they would be happy to accept that. But the Ming Dynasty of China said the only taxes you're allowed to give us are money. Every single country before them in the entirety of world history, usually their taxes were based on the current food that the population would make. Like in Europe, the taxes were based on grain. In other Asian cultures, the taxes were based on rice. And I just said that Mexico based their taxes on corn, but in China, they said, we don't want your rice, we want money. So they kind of forced the people of China to really do all the hard work and sell their rice and make money, and then they give the money to the Chinese government. So it's definitely a harder task on the people to give hard currency than they would just give a portion of their harvests. Yeah, the Ming, they also were the big, strong power in China. And I'm pretty confident, yeah, the Ming, they come right after the Mongols. So if we're sort of judging through history, we got the Song, the Yuan, and then the Ming dynasty of China. The Ming were kind of this uprising against the Mongols. And to a degree, they were independent. But pretty soon after this, another group of horse people is going to come and invade China again. The Great Wall just didn't work. It was a bad investment. But yeah, the Ming, they enforced a tribute system on Korea, Tibet, and some of their other neighbors. And it's just because China's just so big. China's so powerful. And I remember learning some stuff when I went to like Korean museums. I would like listen to the English translation as I walked through the museum, and it was always like, Japan was bullying us, and then China was bullying us, and then Japan was being a bully again. Poor Korea. They're just stuck between two generally powerful countries. And then also Tibet is generally it's pretty culturally different from the rest of China, but China sort of says that Tibet has always been a part of the Chinese kind of territorial sphere because Chinese historians cite the fact that Tibet was giving them tribute. So they say, well, Tibet was giving the Chinese government taxes even 500 years ago. Therefore, Tibet is a part of China. I think that's a really weak argument. And hey, I might have an under opinion here, but I think Tibet is it should be its own country. I personally met the Dalai Lama. He's a great dude. So, all right, moving on. So let's check it out. Okay, now the lesser gunpowder empire. So the Qing Manchu Empire. This is the empire that comes after the Ming. So once again, the Chinese dynasties, the only ones you'll ever have to know in this class, are Song, Yuan, Ming, Qing, Manchu. Qing Manchu is the last one. And the Qing Manchu Empire, it was founded by steppe invaders, just like I said in the last slide. The people just keep coming from the steppe. You really... Why did the Great Wall work? I don't know. They took over China in 1616, such a great year to remember. And they'll be the last Chinese dynasty. They'll be there until just before the start of World War One. The cool thing about the Manchus is they were really good at riding horses, just like all the other steppe people, but they also used guns. So they're not using bows and arrows. They're riding around with gunshots. Their guns weren't as good as the other gunpowder empires, so that's why I'm calling them a lesser gunpowder empire. And they're not Muslim like the other gunpowder empires, so they really don't fit a lot of the same things as the empires I talked about last time. But yeah, they kicked out the old Chinese emperor and just kept business going as usual. They're like, okay, we're the horse people. We're just like the Yuan dynasty, sort of doing the same vibe as Kublai Khan. Keep all the government stuff going in China. Keep collecting tribute. Keep doing the meritocracy thing. We're just going to be in charge, and we're going to take 10% of all your money. But the Manchus, I think they made a pretty big mistake, okay? Because the Mongols had this general idea of trying to expand their reach around the world. They tried to grow their empire. They even used the treasure fleet to sort of explore the world, to try to take over more territory, even though it really didn't do that. But the Manchus, their attitude was this: we took over China, we're good, okay? Build more of that Great Wall, close the borders, we don't want to do any of this Silk Road stuff that we don't have to do. We don't want any influence from the outside world. We don't want any new religions coming in. Shut China down. There was an exception to that, though, because the Manchus really loved silver. And they sort of said, hey, if you're a trader coming on the Silk Road, if you bring your ship to China, there better be some silver in that dang boat. That's the only thing we'll take from you, and then we'll give you whatever we make in China. We'll trade our silk, our porcelain, our tea, whatever you want. Give us silver. And this is going to come back to haunt the Qing in a future episode of history. So you just got to remember, China loves silver. And weird fact, they didn't like gold, and they didn't like rubies, they didn't like emeralds. They just said only silver. So hey, that's just what the Chinese want. All right. So moving on. Okay, monumental agriculture. Yeah, this is another kind of one-off thing that I have to talk about in this unit. But all over the world, societies are building these huge, giant palaces or monuments or just these epic homes for their leaders to show the power and prestige of their leaders. Like, if you go to any of these places, and I think I've only been to one. Yeah, I think I've only been to one of the places on this list myself. But walking into St. Peter's Basilica, you're like, oh my gosh, this building's really epic. This building's huge. Holy cow, how'd they build this thing? Oh my god, this thing's 600 years old. This doesn't make logical sense. And I mean, especially like, imagine if you're a trader on the Silk Road and you see this picture right here. This is the palace at Lhasa for the Dalai Lama, the Dalai Lama's traditional home. You see something like this and you're like, wow, that leader has some serious power. I shouldn't mess with them. And that's the whole purpose of building these just crazy giant buildings, to try to, it's sort of like the MTV Cribs of world history, where you're saying how truly epic you are. But yeah, let me read all these. So we got the Incan Sun Temple at Cusco, the French Palace at Versailles, the Russian Palace at St. Petersburg, St. Peter's Basilica at the Vatican, and the Forbidden City in Beijing. All of these are really, really epic. And I've got pictures of them on the next slide, so let's check them out. Okay, so these two pictures right here are the Palace of Versailles. It's right outside of Paris. The French kings built this, and this one actually comes a little bit later in history. This is something that was built in like the 1700s, maybe starting in the 1600s. So it's a little bit out of historical order, but it definitely fits with this theme that all around the world these countries are building this giant, amazing buildings to just sort of overwhelm anybody who wants to challenge the power and the authority of the leader. And here's something I'm just going to add. This will maybe be like a bonus question on a Kahoot or a quiz or something. This room right here is called the Hall of Mirrors. You will find it in the Palace of Versailles, right outside of Paris. And the Hall of Mirrors was where the kings of France kind of held court. And, when the King of France wanted to meet with people, he would usually sit in a big throne in the Hall of Mirrors, and people would walk in. And the Hall of Mirrors is, by all accounts, the coolest room on planet Earth. It is totally encased in gold, got these glass chandeliers. It has windows on both sides, and they designed the room in this cool way where if you open the windows in certain angles, different colors of light reflect into the room, so they sort of understood the light spectrum effect. And by all accounts, if you ever go in the Hall of Mirrors, you will be amazed. And you'll be like, oh my gosh, they built this room 400 years ago. Why can't we do this more today? Oh wait, it's because we don't have tons of gold and diamonds and stuff to decorate all over the room. And the reason why the Hall of Mirrors is so famous is there's like 7 very important events in world history that all happen in the Hall of Mirrors. So the Hall of Mirrors is going to come up again and again and again throughout world history. So keep that in the back of your head. Right here, this is the gate of the Forbidden City in China. And this was the traditional home of the Chinese emperors. I've got a really cool story about what happens to the last emperor of China, but we'll get there. Puyi had a rough life. Oh my gosh. But the Forbidden City today is the most visited museum on planet Earth. And the Forbidden City is also the largest home on planet Earth. I think there's something like 600 individual buildings inside the Forbidden City. And it was called the Forbidden City because the Emperor of China only allowed his male family members, and then more or less unlimited female attendants and concubines and stuff to live with him. If you wanted to be a male servant, if you wanted to sort of be a dude who wasn't related to the emperor and you wanted to live in that city, you had to do a little snip snip down there because the emperor didn't want his lady friends to get any ideas from you. So it was the city that was forbidden for men outside of the emperor's family to live in. Yeah, there you go. This here is a picture of the Hagia Sophia. This is probably one of, yeah, I think I can say this is the oldest building in this whole list, actually. This was built by the Byzantines originally in, I think, the year 600 AD. But once this place got taken over by the Ottoman Empire, the Ottomans turned the building, the Hagia Sophia here, it was once a church. Oh, what did I do? It was once a church, and then they just converted it into a mosque. So they scrubbed off all the pictures of Jesus. They drew the Arabic symbols for Allah and for Muhammad, peace be upon him, and they posted these minarets in all corners of Hagia Sophia, turning it into a mosque. My sister has been to the Hagia Sophia, and believe it or not, the Hagia Sophia has sort of some similar effects to the Hall of Mirrors, where like the colors change and blend and get molded around, so it's super duper cool. And my sister says it's the coolest building she's ever been in on planet Earth, and my sister's been freaking everywhere. She's amazing. And then this right here, is this the Sun Temple at Cusco? Maybe it is. This is definitely a building in the Americas. I want to say this is the temple at Texacala in Mexico, though. But anyway, whatever culture it's from, it's a giant pyramid made by peoples in the Americas, so that when other cultures visited that city, they'd be like, "Oh my gosh, this thing's massive and crazy. We shouldn't mess with these people because they have the power and the prestige and the ability to make these amazing, amazing buildings to intimidate us and to show the power of their culture." Okay, so also during this period, Islam continued to push its way into West Africa and made a pretty lasting legacy that's still true to this day. And if we remember Mansa Musa, that golden spreading king of the nation of Mali, he eventually dies, and his descendants don't really do a great job leading Mali. So Mali's neighbor, the country of Songhai, which is in modern-day Niger, Songhai is led by this dude right here. His name is Azkia. Pretty badass guy. Azkia takes over Mali, takes over the gold fields, and generally torches the vast majority of the East African kingdoms. And the legacy of the sort of war between Songhai and Mali is it created a lot of instability in the West African sphere. And this is going to get exploited later in history by white people. Ugh. But Songhai, it was definitely a very Muslim country, and they did even more to build mosques. And this is kind of the style of mosque that you'll see in the West African part of the world. So, but yeah, they definitely do lock in Islam as like the religion of choice in that part of the world. Eventually, Christianity comes in there once Europeans colonize the place. But that happens later in history. Okay, and religion and government, I'll save this for the next video. This video is kind of short. All right, peace out.